All right, I'm ready.
All right, Mike is ready, which means I am ready, which means this is the Mike Farrell Sports Show. My name is Adam. Mike Farrell is with us for another week. Mike, my friend, week 8 in the books. How you feeling, buddy?
Pissed, and I'll tell you why.
Well, go ahead.
The weather here in Connecticut sucks. It rained all day, and people say we need the rain. We don't need the rain. We need the rain. We don't need the rain on October 24th. It's miserable. It's dreary. It's cold. I still wear flip flops because I'm trying to keep the summer alive. So my feet are wet and they're all pruny. I'm a miserable human being because of the weather today.
Yeah, it must be the weather, Mike. Week 8 wasn't so bad. There were a few interesting ball games, a few interesting results we can chat through. Probably not the least of which is I think a lot of eyes were on Tuscaloosa to see how Alabama and those boys would rebound after a tough loss at Tennessee. Easy pickings on the field, Mike. 30-6, Alabama wins Mississippi State, but a lot of controversy pre-game leading up to that game, whether or not Jermaine Burton would be playing. So for those who haven't heard the story yet, there was a Zapruder film type video taken from the stands of Knoxville that appeared to show Jermaine Burton slapping or hitting somebody in the face on the way off the field. That obviously got back to Nick Saban. I think there was expectations that maybe Burton would be disciplined. Turns out that was not the case. He was not suspended. He was available at 2 catches in that game, Mike. And that seemed to be what everyone wanted to talk about. Obviously, Bama rebounds on the win column, but Burton and Saban, what'd you make of A, Burton not being suspended, then B, Saban's kind of response and his reaction to the whole situation?
Yeah, so I mean, I have strong feelings about it, but let's be clear. I mean, this was not Joe Mixon. This is not Ray Rice. None of this is even close to that stratosphere. But, Nick Saban's ticked off at the SEC. He's ticked off at the SEC officials. He's ticked off at Greg Sankey. He's ticked off because he lost, because they rushed the field, blah, blah, blah. And when Nick Saban's ticked off, he digs his heels in and he does what Nick Saban wants to do, which is not suspend Jermaine Burton. He's going to therapy, they say. That's great. I think everybody should be in therapy, myself included. But you have to do something. Again, saying he was scared. I mean, there's so many non-Alabama things happening this year. One of them is, certainly that we're used to is Nick Saban playing players who get in trouble off the field in a win-first mentality. But this is the second time in 2 weeks I've heard the phrase scared around Alabama. The first one was, they weren't. There was a lot of anxiety, Will Anderson said, the team coming out of the tunnel against Tennessee. And now, the players are scared when the field is rushed. It just speaks to, I think Nick Saban's lying. I think Jermaine Burton's lying. And I like Jermaine Burton. He's a nice kid. I mean, everything I've had, every incident that I've had in covering him through recruiting, through the portal, has been great. But you can't touch somebody if they're not threatening you. This was clearly no threat. He went out of his way to do it. The girl was walking towards him, saw him, moved aside, clear space, and he reached out and did what he did. So he should have been suspended, not a half game, which is like a middle finger to suspension. It's almost like a joke now to suspend somebody for a half. Just suspend him for a game. You're going to beat Mississippi State anyways. Mississippi State, you own Mississippi State. They can't hang with you. Mike Leach was hilarious after talking about dinosaurs and, his players losing the use of their arms. And that's always great fodder. And it's fun. And it's what college football is about. And it should be fun to have fans storm the field. So those people that say, well, the fans shouldn't have stormed the field, blah, 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 that's college football. You just know not to touch anybody. So Saban dropped the ball here. But I have to point out over and over again, the outrage I had for Joe Mixon being allowed to play at Oklahoma was legitimate outrage. He sat out a year, Bob Stoops brought him back, and he knew he was a key component to trying to make a national title run, blah, blah, blah. This isn't anything like that. I don't really think this was even an incident. It was caught on tape. But because it was caught on tape, the optics say suspend the person, teach them a lesson so that it doesn't happen again, and he didn't do it.
To be fair, here was Saban's quote. He told reporters, "Look, I don't know how many of you have ever been in that situation. I talked to him. He was scared. I was scared. Some of our players were scared. I assume Mike, he's the context of which is, hey, there's a lot of people in the field. We didn't know what was happening. I assume that's the context in which he used the word scared. He later went on to say, I don't think it was necessary to suspend the guy. If you knew the whole story, maybe you wouldn't either, but I'm not going to divulge that. So that is Saban's rationale. And it is interesting because with all due respect to Jermaine Burton, he's not a key cog on the field, right? It isn't like he's the star player and you can't win or you can't win this game without him. He had 2 catches for 40 yards. And so to your point, it would have been very easy for Nick to go, hey, you know what? Take this one off, kid. You know what? Go get your thoughts together. It was stupid. Don't do that again. Get your head right, and we'll see you next week. And it's interesting that he dug his heels in the sand. It makes you wonder: is there something going on? Or to your point, it sounds like you're saying you think this is more just Nick Saban being like, "Hey, I'm the ruler. No one tells me what to do."
Well, I think now that he's under a lot of scrutiny, the real story will come out, and maybe there is more to this. Initially, if you remember, who was it, Coach Grimes at Oklahoma, was fired prior to the season for using a racial slur, and I thought initially that he was looking at his phone, reading at somebody's phone. He grabbed a phone of a player, was looking at it. I thought it was like just reading it aloud, and then realized in the middle of that sentence that he shouldn't have read that aloud, but he did it over and over again. So at first I was like, this guy shouldn't be fired for this, and then I found out he said it multiple times, and then I'm like, well, he's stupid, he should be fired. Maybe there's more to this, and we'll see if there is. If you're scared, like legitimately scared, you first of all, there was no one around Jermaine Burton at this point in time. If you see this, it's really an odd clearing
Yeah.
in the space, and she's walking towards him and gives him plenty of leeway. He doesn't have his helmet on. That's a nice protective device if you're scared, or if you're overwhelmed. Keep your helmet on, strap it up so you don't get hit in the head. All the fear that comes with this. This didn't look like fear. This looked like an act of aggression, but again, completely minor aggression. She didn't press charges. I believe she went silent on social media. More could come out, and then I'll change my tune if it does. Maybe, something was said to him. I don't know. But it looked like he was just trying to sort of knock the phone out of her hand, and she was filming the festivities. So we don't know the truth. I just know, there's one of two things that could have been done here. He could have played Jermaine Burton, which he did, and faced this scrutiny, or he could have sat him, like you said, for one game. He's not, key to a victory over Mississippi State, blah, blah, blah. And probably we wouldn't be talking about this at all, but we are, and that's what Nick Saban doesn't care about. He doesn't care whether we're talking about this. And I think it's a grudge that he has against losing, against the field being stormed, and against the SEC in itself.
Do you think he'll face any more backlash because of this? I mean, he's Nick Saban, right? He's kind of untouchable. He's Teflon. Do you think he gets any further backlash from this?
No. And the reason I say that is we've seen much more egregious off-field incidents where coaches have just, it almost, it's a situation where, again, I go back to Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon sat out a year and then he was back on the field. And nobody really, after the first couple of games, like, oh, yeah, Joe Mixon is back after serving a 1-year suspension, blah, 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 being kicked off the team and then being brought back. Then after that, it wasn't mentioned. And this, the news cycle is 72 hours. This will be done when something else comes to replace it. And this is such a nothing, honestly. And I know people are going to be upset in hearing that. I condemn Nick Saban for not suspending him because I think that's a life lesson and an opportunity to teach him a lesson. And also say, listen, winning's not the most important thing. It's how we act off the field or after a loss that's important. But this is not really anything that we should be worried about. But yet here I am talking about it because I have to, because it's the hottest topic in college football.
It feels like an odd opportunity that he could have just set a precedent for, hey guys, we're not going to be knuckleheads. So like if you're going to do stupid stuff, you're going to pay a penalty, right? The next guy who does something dumb and gets suspended, right? Well, hey, I missed class and I got suspended. This guy did the following and didn't, right? It just feels like an odd hill to die on to say you could have very easily taken this as a precedent setter. Don't do dumb things. It's a privilege to play at Alabama. Conduct yourself with good character. You know what? You didn't do that. Go sit down for a week. It just feels like a missed opportunity for some reason other than he's just Nick Saban. It just doesn't give a bleep what you think about him.
Doesn't give a bleep. And he's suspended players before.
Yeah,
I mean,
for
it's
sure.
not like he's never done that. And then you go back to Musha Muhammad at Michigan State, 100 years ago when Nick Saban was at the head coach of Michigan State, and he ran afoul of the law, and then he broke probation. Saban didn't suspend him at all, and Muhammad went on to have a great career. Turned out to be a great human being by all accounts.
Mhm.
Um, you know, this is no reflection whatsoever of Jermaine Burton's character. What it is what you said. This is an opportunity to say, hey, you know, listen, what you did wasn't horrible. It's not going to change your life, but don't be stupid. Don't put your hands on other people. If they put their hands on you first, if she came up and slapped him in the face, different story. But that's not what we're seeing here. So just keep your hands to yourself. Get off the field as fast as possible. Take your loss like a man. And I don't think Saban's doing it. But these guys are narcissists. I mean, I get it. Bob Stoops is a narcissist. With Mixon, Jimbo Fisher, with Jameis Winston, on and on. There's just so many examples. And, you know, neither Jermaine Burton's not as talented as either of those two players I mentioned. He's not a key to a national championship for
No.
Alabama. But these guys are narcissists, and they feel they can do what they want, and they'll do whatever it takes to get ahead. And so maybe Jermaine Burton's a little bit more important to this offense than we thought.
It feels like Nick's been a little crankier, a little more ornery than usual this year. I mean, we saw the stuff with Jimbo. Do you think it comes to a point where maybe he's just getting fed up? Do you see a scenario where maybe I'm just throwing this out? There's a question. Maybe at the end of the year, he walks away and says, "Hey, I've had enough of all this nonsense. I got nothing more to prove." Like he just feels like he's more on edge than you normally see Nick Saban.
There's been talk of that, in internal coaching circles and rumors and stuff like that, that he might step down after this season, and not just because of this.
Yeah.
The frustration level is very
Yeah,
high.
he
He's
didn't
been
like the NIL
frustrated.
stuff, right? That was I mean, it
Right.
just feels like there are small little things that have bubbled up that have gotten under his skin that previously you might go, okay, whatever, Nick. But it just feels like he's kind of hanging on to a lot of those things.
Well, and the funny part about Nick Saban is he doesn't like NIL unless Bryce Young's doing a Dr. Pepper, $1 million ad. He doesn't like the transfer portal unless he can get Jameer Gibbs. He doesn't like what he doesn't like, but he'll use it to his advantage. But what he really doesn't like is the fact that he loses coaches every year, and he has to replace them. And each year that happens, you're probably going to downgrade a little bit. I mean, they haven't replaced Kirby Smart on defense yet. Still, Steve Sarkisian was a better offensive coordinator than Bill O'Brien is. So that's a frustration. The penalties are a frustration. The media coverage is a frustration. So I think there is a possibility, if let's say they struggle, and by struggle, I mean, let's say they lose a second game and don't get to the SEC championship game. Um, you know, that's happened in recent years, but it's very rare. Maybe he steps down. But I also think with this expanded playoff coming sooner than later, 2024, it's really sort of low hanging fruit for Nick Saban to win a couple more national championships, because even if he loses 10 games in that situation, he can get there. And we all know, any given Saturday, his team can win. But yeah, he's frustrated. There's no doubt about it. And usually a frustrated Nick Saban wins and takes it out on the rest of the world. But we've seen them lose to Kirby Smart when I thought they were going to take control of that game. Now we've seen him lose to Josh Heupel when I thought they were going to take control of that game. Maybe he's losing the ability to fight back with victories. And it sounds stupid. I mean, this is a team that's lost one game.
Mm-hmm.
They're in the top 10. They're in the playoff hunt. They're very likely to go to the SEC championship game, and that's a play-in for the playoff. It sounds stupid to talk about this regression, but more and more we're seeing things we don't see at Alabama. Multiple penalties, stupid on-field acts, anxiety out of the tunnel. The word scared and anxious being used 2 weeks in a row at Alabama. Not used to this. So that might be something that drives him to retire. I don't know.
All right, let's stay in the SEC for a second, and a fan base that's got to be as frustrated as Nick Saban is the folks up at College Station, like Jimbo Fisher and those boys go to South Carolina. They never lead in this game. They trail 17-3 at the end of the first. They make it a little bit respectable, but lose 30-24 to a South Carolina team that featured Spencer Rattler, who threw 0 touchdowns, only 168 passing yards. I mean, this is not like the vaunted offense that we've seen elsewhere. This South Carolina team is okay, but they're not a great team by any stretch.
No.
And they took this thing wire to wire, Mike. Jimbo now looking at a 3-4 record for the Aggies. Again, the 75, 85, whatever plus $1 million man is just not getting it done so far. What do you think? What happens next? I mean, we keep letting Jimbo just ride this thing out. Where's Jimbo's future as it relates to Texas A&M?
Well, we're halfway through the 10-year plan, and it's as bad as it's been. It's horrible.
I love a good 10-year plan, by the way.
Well, yeah, and they're 3-4, and this is rich billionaire boosters getting what they deserve because they shouldn't have thrown this much money at him in the first place. If you did any sort of background interview with people at Florida State, you would say maybe this isn't a guy we could trust with our program, at least $100 million worth of our program. Secondly, they extended and re-upped him after COVID, which is just idiotic. That was just a throw-out season. Yeah, it was an all-SEC schedule, but everything about that season was just odd and off. And that's the only good year he's had. And they came just shy of the playoff. But it's so much money thrown at a guy who won a national championship with Jameis and has proven that he can't develop a quarterback since. And I'm tired of hearing him say how close we are. That was his speech after the South Carolina game, is that we're right there. We just got to make a couple plays. You're in year 5, man, and you're 3-4. You're 11-8 in your last 19 football games. You're not even close to worth $10 million a year. And this isn't working out. Now, we had the argument last week, and, I get to let you choose the side sometimes, and you chose the let's fire Jimbo side, and I took the let's keep him because of recruiting. That's the only thing that's going right. That's it. Number 1 recruiting class, top 10 recruiting class this year. But if you can't win with players and if you can't develop a quarterback, it doesn't really matter Kirby Smart won without a quarterback. We can make that argument. Stetson Bennett was not a high-level recruit. He screwed up the Justin Fields thing. It wasn't, Vandegrift. It wasn't even Fromm. It wasn't Jacob Eason. It wasn't any of the 5 stars that he recruited to Georgia, but he won with team talent. And Jimbo should be doing the same thing with these great recruiting classes, and he's not doing it. So I think he's just, to me, gut reaction when I see him talk is a guy who knows that he's got $80+ million waiting for him. A guy who knows that he can land at West Virginia tomorrow. And a guy who really isn't taking this as seriously. Now, he said nobody's happy. I can assure you of that. But I don't really see a lot of fight in this football team. There's no way on earth this talent level should lose to South Carolina. It just shouldn't happen. They shouldn't lose to App State. So he's coaching a team in a lethargic manner, kind of when he backed his way out of Florida State and left them in a shambles. And if they're not careful, Jimbo's going to leave Texas A&M in shambles. And that SEC West is no joke. And we've got 2 good teams from the Big 12 coming in there. He could set this program back many, many years if they don't cut the cord here fast. And I think at the end of the season, the decision has to be made. If he goes 7-5 or 6-6, they got to come up with that money and get rid of him.
Well, I was going to ask you. So they're 3-4 to be bowl eligible. You need 6 wins. They have 5 games left. Can you find me 3 more wins on the schedule? Ole Miss, Florida, at Auburn, UMass, LSU. Are there 3 wins on that schedule?
Well, UMass.
So UMass is 1.
I could be UMass myself.
At Auburn?
Just me. Well, me and you. Okay, you snap it to me and then go out for a pass.
Done.
At Auburn, yeah. Auburn sucks.
Okay. So then they got to beat either Ole Miss, Florida, or LSU at home.
Okay, and LSU looks good, and they're a little bit up and down. But you would assume, LSU would win that football game. They're playing much better. You would assume Ole Miss will destroy them. Now, both of those games, I believe, are at home, but I don't think that matters. App State was at home, so who cares? So let's chalk those down to 2 wins, 2 losses, and it all comes down to that Florida game. But at that point, does it matter? Does it really matter? Let's say they lose to Ole Miss, they beat Florida, they beat Auburn, They beat UMass and they're bowl eligible, and then they lose to LSU and go 6-6. This guy's getting paid $10 million a year plus. He's a $100 million man for 6-6. Get him out of here. And the reason I said last week, I had full confidence they were going to win that game against South Carolina going in. First of all, the second thing is the recruiting. But I'm not really convinced that this guy can get it done with the recruiting classes that he's got. There's a lot of young talent on this team, but if Connor Wegman's the next guy, and he's the highest rated quarterback that Jimbo's had, since Jameis, why isn't he playing more? Why is he being forced into games when Haynes King's hurt every other play? Why have we waited so long to find this out? We might find out that he's not ready either, and he's going to look bad. And that's where I just throw my hands up and say, you got to get rid of this guy, because as much as Sumlin wasn't the answer, he was better than this, and that's what's
Yeah.
scary.
What is I mean, you're plugged into the recruiting cycle still. What is the percentage of factors that kids are choosing schools right now, in October of 2022? How much of it is coach? How much of it is scheme? How much of it is NIL? I mean, because I think that's the interesting factor here is, if the NIL money is what everyone purports it to be at Texas A&M, and you swap Jimbo out, the money stays the same for the players. You bring in another, hopefully, bigger name coach. Do you see that much downslide? I guess how much of this is Jimbo that kids see him in the living room and go, "That's my guy," and how much of this is kids see the check that comes and goes, "Hey, that's my school."
So Jimbo's always been a great recruiter.
Mm.
When he wants to be a great recruiter, he was a very good recruiter at LSU. Saban did a great job at Florida State until he stopped trying when he knew he was out, when he was leaving. And he's been a great recruiter at Texas A&M. Jimbo has a good pitch, but he can no longer sell first-round NFL quarterbacks. I mean, the E.J. Manuel, Christian Ponder, Jameis Winston, um, the shelf life on that has long since expired. You can't even sell good offense because they look horrible on offense. So to your point, everybody thinks it's NIL. Everybody thinks it's 100% NIL, which is kind of bogus. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into recruiting. It's not like these kids visit, you write out a fake big check like on The Price is Right or something and hand it to them. There's recruiting that's involved. There's a lot of things behind the scenes as far as, I got to deal with the crazy uncle, or I got to deal with the mom or the divorced parents. All this stuff goes into it, and he's very good at navigating that. But this job is so attractive, and obviously they're willing to pay so much money that they could go out and get somebody that's as big a name as Jimbo, who's had more success and a better track record, and recruiting would stay exactly the same. So I think in a week, this loss to South Carolina has really changed my tune, because I guess I was falling for the excuses. I was falling for the we're close. I was hoping the
Mm.
Wegman thing was going to, sort of bring them through, and the talent would eventually win. This was a roster that is probably 5 times more talented than South Carolina, maybe 8 times more talented, and they couldn't win, and they still can't score. So I'm completely out on Jimbo, and that's the loss that kind of tipped me. So get a new coach, go after Lane Kiffin, throw him $10 million, bring him to Texas A&M. He's going to recruit as well or better with that, the combination of NIL, the attractiveness of recruiting in the state of Texas, and I could recruit a top 10 class to Texas A&M. A number one class, probably not, but with NIL, Lane Kiffin certainly can get a number one class.
Well, Matt Rule's still out there too, right? I mean, Matt Rule obviously knows Texas pretty well. I mean, that's an interesting name to kind of keep in the backdrop.
A great coach, and he's not a guy that's going to flash recruiting all over the place. He's not a great flashy recruiter. He's a talent evaluator. He'll get his talent, but he is a great coach. But I also think this job is so big and so attractive to the right person that Matt Rule's a great candidate. Don't get me wrong, but that they could pluck a coach away, a
Mm.
really good coach away. And whether it's, I know Baylor's been down this year, but whether it's a Dave Aranda, whether it's a Lane Kiffin, whether it's Dan Lanning, I just think there's enough money there, and enough backing of the program that they can go and get a really good coach who's happy where he is. That's what they did with Fisher, except he wasn't happy where he was. And I think that disgruntled nature he came over and he tried to, reinvent himself and his love for football, and it hasn't shown yet.
Well, you mentioned Lane Kiffin. Let's start there. Ole Miss and the Rebs head into LSU, and LSU puts it on a pretty good, Mike, 45-20 win for Brian Kelly and the Tiger squad there.
Mm-hmm.
I know the Tigers have been kind of up and down. They've been playing pretty well of late. Jaden Daniels looks pretty good. They had that thing rolling, Mike. I mean, they shut him out in the second half, and they were rolling on offense. Were you surprised at how handily LSU? I suppose you weren't shocked LSU won, but were you surprised how handily they won?
Yeah, I mean, I expected this to be a close game. Always the home field advantage for LSU is a big one, but it's not a night game at Death Valley. It's it's certainly an advantage. But I think what we're seeing here is the maturity and development of Jaden Daniels in this system. He ran the ball 23 times. He might as well be a running back. He threw the ball 28. He's the entire offense, but he's getting more comfortable with the rest of the players, and it's still not showing in the stat sheet. You don't really have, Keishawn Butte showing up and making big plays, and you just don't have a lot of explosiveness. But it's enough to keep people off balance. And Daniels, honestly, is, as a freshman at Arizona State, he was an impressive kid, and I saw him at high school, and at Under Armour games, very good recruit for him. He is legitimately 5 times better than he ever was at Arizona State. He has raised his game to a level that I didn't expect to see. Remember, there was some talk of him not even winning this job at the beginning of the season, and now he's put himself into the forefront of SEC quarterbacks. That doesn't mean he's a great pro prospect. I mean, he's certainly draftable, but as a college player, he's really hard to game plan for. So it was a surprise to me they won by 25 points. Because that Ole Miss defense has been playing pretty good this year, and he just did whatever he wanted against them.
Well, what happens to Ole Miss now? They got a 4 left at Texas A&M, like we talked about. Then they are home Bama at Arkansas, and then they finished up in the Egg Bowl. What do you make? I mean, is this Lane Kiffin team a fraud? Is this just a blip on the radar, and they can continue to play out? I mean, where do you see Ole Miss now that you've seen some of the warts show themselves against LSU?
They're as good as their quarterback offensively, and Jackson Dart is not very consistent. The running game is awesome. Zach Evans obviously wasn't part of this loss, but they've got a 3-headed monster at running back if everybody's healthy. They got good wide receivers. Offensive line's okay, not great. Jackson Dart's the problem. When he's on, they're very dangerous, but when he makes a couple mistakes, they're very gettable. And the defense, I think, has been a little bit of a fraud. I mean, this is what happens with every loss. You go back and you look at an undefeated team, and suddenly they become like, okay, who'd they beat? They beat Troy, who cares? Central Arkansas, Georgia Tech, Tulsa. Tulsa's good, but still, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Auburn. Kentucky's their only good win, and they struggled in that game. So you do wonder if they're a fraud. Now they should beat A&M. They'll lose to Bama. Arkansas will be a tough one on the road. And Mississippi State's always a tough one. So I think you're looking at a 10-2 football team here, which is great. Lane Kiffin took this team from essentially, Hugh Freeze had there was a lot of talk when he was put 3 first-rounders in. They were the number 2 team in the country when Mississippi State was number 1, or maybe they were number 1 and Mississippi State was number 2. But since then, nobody's been talking about Ole Miss. Nobody cares about Ole Miss. And now you're talking about a fan base that's upset that they lost so badly to LSU, and that they were hoping to make a run at the playoff. So he's done a great job. 10-2 football team, and someone to keep an eye on, because Lane Kiffin, no one can predict what Lane Kiffin's going to do. He's happy there. He's got a great fit there. It doesn't matter.
Well, why don't you predict? Is this a crystal ball Mike time? Is this his last season at Ole Miss?
No, I don't think so, because the carousel's not as enticing this year as it will be in a couple of years. If there's a job out there like Texas A&M, if there's a job out there like LSU, there was some talk before they got Brian Kelly and they went after Lincoln Riley that they were involved with Lane Kiffin. If there's some, let's say Nick Saban does step
Alabama,
down.
Mike.
Right. Let's say Nick Saban does step down, and nobody has a big enough ego to step in there, except for maybe Lane Kiffin. So there's going to be better jobs open over the next couple of years. Um, I know the concern from the Manning family
Mm.
because the Manning family lives and dies Ole Miss. You know, Peyton obviously loves Tennessee, but that family is really, really tied to Ole Miss. And he was looking at Ole Miss. And the reason that Arch Manning didn't really consider Ole Miss was because Lane Kiffin is kind of flaky and he might bolt. And that speaks volumes to me that I think he's going to be gone in 2 or 3 years, but not this season.
Let's go to the ACC for a second here.
Clemson,
Clemson, Syracuse.
yeah.
Syracuse was up pretty handily at halftime, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Clemson makes a comeback. Some would argue they make a comeback with some help from some guys wearing white and black striped shirts, but nonetheless, we saw something in this game that I think we've been asking for or wondering about for a long time. Cade Klubnik gets in the game. DJ Uyunglele pulled by Dabo. I don't know if Cade leads the comeback, but he's the quarterback. They have a comeback. Draw with that what you will. Clemson survives at home against a tough Syracuse Orange team. Is Clemson worse than we thought? Is Syracuse better than we thought? And is this DJU's sort of jump the shark Henry Winkler moment?
Mm-hmm. This is Clemson's good. I don't think they're great. I think they're going to go undefeated and obviously make the playoff. Syracuse is good. They're a good football team. Now, for some reason, they didn't run Sean Tucker as much as they expected. I expected them to. You know, they figured out Schrader. Schrader's a guy that's going to look at his first read, and if it's not available, he's going to run. And they couldn't figure that out in the first half, and they figured it out in the second half. Syracuse is a good team, but this Clemson team got a bit of an energy bolt when Klubnik went in there. They looked like there was just more of an excitement on offense and more of excitement on defense, and they played harder. Might have been because they were losing, but it might have been the spark that he gave them. Now he threw 2 passes. He didn't lead the comeback. You know, they just ran the ball down Syracuse's throat. But I wrote in Fact or Fiction today that I think they should make the change. Now they're not going
Mhm.
to, and I get the argument as to why they won't. You know, you got Notre Dame, Louisville, Miami, and South Carolina. You should win all 4 of those games, and you should go undefeated. So why make a quarterback change, which could kind of upset the apple cart? But I think that this team lacks a tremendous deal of confidence in DJ. So when he fumbled away the scoop and score through his second interception, I think the team was like, oh, you know, here we go. We're down 21-10. This is last season all over again. This guy can't get us going. They put Klubnik in. All of a sudden, everything gets a little bit more hyped. They come back and win. You're going to see Klubnik again, is my prediction. DJ is going to be the starter against Notre Dame when he falters again over the next 4 games. And listen, this is a guy who's thrown 17 touchdowns, I think, against what, 4 picks? He's a 6'5", 245-pound guy with a really live arm who's fairly mobile. This is an NFL quarterback we're talking about here. But something tells me that this team isn't playing as hard for him as they should be. And I think we're going to eventually see that play out. Not in a loss, but in another benching.
It's so weird though, Mike. When you decide to pull a quarterback, mid game, you're already saying, "Hey, something's not working here, right? There's something not clicking here." And you can easily say, "Yeah, this is just one game plan, off night, wasn't seeing the field, blah 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 blah." But you've already planted that seed now, right? So now the next time DJ goes out and goes, 0 for 7 on his first 3 drives, has a stupid penalty, you're going to start hearing those questions. You're going to start hearing that from the fans. It's just funny to me that Dabo had the stones to do that now because now you
Oh,
open that
great
door.
call.
Now you
Great
open that
call,
door.
though. I mean, that's why he's a national
Yeah,
championship
for
coach.
sure. Yeah.
That's why he's won it twice. They don't have a ton of faith in Klubnik as a game quarterback yet. You could tell based on the offensive changes and not letting him sling the ball around a lot. So I think that's why he's sticking with DJ. But I mean, come on, the guy is a great coach, and he made a great call, and he knew just what you said. This is going to cause some questions. This is going to cause a lot of reporters to ask, should Klubnik be the starter? We got a quarterback controversy all over again. He knew in that third quarter that if he did that, he would get this. But he also knew that if they lost this game to Syracuse, season was over, no playoff for them. Bye bye. And that's what great coaches do. They make tough decisions. It's funny. Kelly Bryant was a guy who led Clemson to numerous victories, was a very efficient quarterback, and Jimbo had the foresight enough to tap him on the shoulder and said, "Listen, we're almost into 4 games. You're going to lose a season if you play beyond 4 games. I'm starting Trevor Lawrence. He's just the future, and he's a better quarterback. And that worked out to win a national championship when Lawrence was a freshman. Um, Dabo is just a genius, and people don't give him credit for that because it's the all shucks, this, that, and the other. He's a great, great coach, and that was a great coaching move.
All right, so Ole Miss could not stay undefeated. Clemson is able to stay undefeated. The
Yep.
other team is TCU. They're down at half, Mike, to Kansas State.
Yeah.
Adrian Martinez less Kansas State. He goes out with an injury early on. They are down 28-17 at halftime, and Kansas State does not score again. TCU comes out with a 38-28 victory, Mike. They remain undefeated. They'll certainly rise, or they have risen in the polls when they're out here on Monday. Is this TCU team legit? Is this the crop of the Big 12 at this point? It's TCU and everybody else is looking up.
You asked this question last week, and I said Kansas State was the best team in the Big 12, and they were winning this football game with a backup quarterback. And once again, TCU stormed from behind and won that football game. So they've beaten the two teams that I thought were the best. At one point, I thought Oklahoma State was the best, and I thought Kansas State. They're the best. They're the best team. I think we're heading towards a showdown with Oklahoma State in a rematch, for the Big 12 title. And I mentioned the words Joe Burrow last week with Max Duggan, and he's not going to throw, 60 touchdowns or whatever, but he is just really, really hard to defend. And he gets better every week, and he doesn't make mistakes. And this is a kid from Iowa. Guess who would really like to have him right now is Kirk Ferentz. He's a special quarterback. He's developed himself into a special quarterback. Wasn't even supposed to be the starter this year. And he's got that Joe Burrow sort of swagger to a much less level. I mean, I'm not comparing them as far as stats and Heisman's and number one overall draft picks, but I'm comparing the way that he's changed the demeanor of this football team with his leadership. And they really look hard to beat. They were dead twice, and they came back from dead. And when teams are dead twice and come back, then they become like a cockroach, man. You just can't kill them. So you look at this schedule, it's still not, super easy. I mean, West Virginia should be a victory. Texas Tech is a little bit tricky, right? They're up and down.
Strange things happen in Lubbock. Yep.
Joey McGuire's got them playing well.
Tortillas fly everywhere, get you in the face. You never know.
Yeah, but lucky TC is at home. So I know you just wanted to bring in the Lubbock story.
I just want to say tortillas, yeah.
I get it. And Lubbock is a very, 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 very strange place. But, West Virginia, Texas Tech should be wins. Texas, who knows what we're going to see with them. Baylor, Iowa State, all winnable football games. So I think this TCU team is the cream of the crop. I think an undefeated season is certainly possible. I still doubt it because I have to, because TCU is not supposed to go undefeated unless Gary Patterson's their coach. But Sonny Dykes, man, when I did my ranking of the first-year coaches, right at the top.
I was going to ask you about Sonny Dykes. So we're not talking enough about him. I mean, obviously he's got TCU in this spot. SMU was pretty good before he left. They've kind of fallen out a little bit with Lashley taking over there. Is Sonny Dykes kind of underrated? Is he one of those under the radar names for some of these openings that may pop open at maybe a bigger school?
Should be. The problem is, and this is the biggest problem with Sonny Dykes, is his Cal years were just a freaking disaster. Now, remember, this is the guy who produced Jared Goff, who became the number one pick in the draft, but 1-11, 5-7, 8-5, 5-7, 19-30 at Cal. Nah. Even at SMU, a lot of talent and a little bit of an underachieving nature, especially in the last couple of years. So I think people are wary. So I don't think he's going to get a lot of people knocking on his door to try to flip immediately. But if he keeps this up, he's certainly rehabbing his reputation. The guy's 78-63 as head coach, 7 of those victories this year. So you take those away, 71-63 as a head coach. Not a great resume, but man, sometimes there's just a fit. Sometimes you get the personnel. Sometimes you get the quarterback who really responds to a guy. Sometimes the offense is a great fit for the personnel you have. Sometimes you've got the Dallas-Fort Worth area and NIL, and he can help recruit. And he could turn at TCU into, in the new Big 12, a perennial title contender. And then if he does that a few years in a row, then people are going to try to take them away.
Another team trying to stay undefeated and not successful, Mike. UCLA travels up to Oregon. This was the college game day atmosphere game. In Oregon, Mike, Bo Nix, 5 touchdown passes, 283 yards through the air. I mean, this one was really never, much in doubt. It was 31-13 at the half. Oregon was up big. UCLA obviously comes back down a little bit from what we thought, Mike. But here's an Oregon team that, to your point, they got blasted week 1. I know you've mentioned this several times. They gave up 1.6 million points to Georgia. But since then, they've really settled in. And week in and week out, you can continue to say they may be the cream of the Pac-12. Certainly looked like that on Saturday.
Yeah, can I brag on Bo Nix's 5-star ranking now? Because I was obliterated for it for years and years.
It took him like 4 years to do it, but yeah,
Doesn't
sure.
matter, man. Doesn't matter. It's all what it
enough.
comes. It's not how you start; it's how you finish. How about Auburn fans with a little special extra bit of pain with Malik Willis and now Bo Nix transferring and becoming great players at Liberty and Oregon, respectively? I mean, if that doesn't speak to what Auburn's become, which is just a absolute dysfunctional family, nothing does. This guy has turned into a smart decision maker, and I never, ever thought I would say that. And by smart, I mean he knows when to throw, he knows when to tuck and run. He's a dual threat. At Auburn, if you remember him, it was a lot of running for his life and then throwing the ball up for grabs.
I've seen a lot of that recently, yes.
And he was is that a Gus crack?
Maybe.
Mm-hmm. So he was running backwards more than anything. And the offensive line sucked. But what he would do is he would run backwards and they would spin and then run backwards and then spin and then run backwards. And he'd be like 30 yards behind the line of scrimmage. And then he'd try and progress towards the line of scrimmage and then throw an interception. Now what he's doing is he's getting into his drop. He's seeing his first, second progression. If they're not there, then he's moving. And then he's deciding 5 yards from the line of scrimmage whether to run or not. Completely different coaching system, completely different quarterback, completely different confidence level. And kudos to Dan Lanning and Kenny Dillingham. Kenny Dillingham's the offensive coordinator. They believed in this kid, and everybody wanted him benched after the 49-3 loss to Georgia. And he was a laughing stock, honestly, of college football over the last many years because of everything I just described at Auburn and the fact that he got destroyed by Georgia. He's got the last laugh now. This is a really legitimate football team. I don't know if they're going to win the Pac-12. They're not going to go to the playoff. We know that. But, man, this is a dangerous, dangerous team. And I think they're the best team in the Pac-12.
I hate to do this already, but can they hold on to Dan Lanning? I mean, I will be the first to say I thought that was a really weird hire when they hired him. Defensive-minded coach. Auburn's obviously always been up-tempo. Chip Kelly, Mark Helfrich, right? You kind of feel like that was really Taggart for that hot minute. You feel like that was the thing, right? Defensive coach from the South. Didn't know how that would fit, but that certainly worked out here after 7 games. Now it's only 7 games, but stranger things have happened. Can they hold on to Dan Lanning? Do you think he's long fit for Eugene?
Yeah, because here's what's going to happen. At the end of this season, Phil Knight and the gang, who have lost, they lost Taggart.
Well, they lost Taggart to Florida State, which probably seems like a gift. Seems like a gift at the end, right?
And then they lost Cristobal
Mario,
Miami, and he's not really lighting up the world at Miami either. But they're tired of losing coaches. So what they're going to do is we're going to see Michigan State. The donors are going to put together some ridiculous contract for Dan Lanning after one season of perhaps 11-1, perhaps 10-2, perhaps a Pac-12 victory, and they're going to give him $80 million guaranteed. So yes, they're going to keep him. And then in 2 years, Dan Lanning's going to go 6-6, and everybody's going to be like, "What the hell do we overpay for this guy for?" He's a good coach. Don't get me wrong, but the overreaction world we're in, especially from jilted teams like Oregon, is going to lead them to a massive contractual overreaction, and I think they will keep him because of that.
Speaking of massive contracts, your boy Sark at Texas. I mean, they have Oklahoma State. They're winning pretty nicely there towards the end. Fourth quarter, that was 34-27. They tie late, and once again, Sark cannot pull out a win. I know you've kind of been one that said, "Hey, we should keep an eye on how that situation plays out down there in Texas." But you talk about recruiting with Texas A&M. Sark's got kind of the same concept there. Yeah. But another game where Longhorns and Sark just can't figure out a way to pull it out in the end.
It's honestly really disappointing because Sark is a good guy.
Mhm.
And he's come a long way, obviously, battling personal demons. And,
Sure.
the Washington job, he did a okay job. And then he went into USC and he was just over his head. And then, rehabbing his life and his career at Alabama. And now he's got a great opportunity at Texas. And they just can't get over the hump. They're close. They
Yeah.
keep getting there. And then they keep stubbing their toe. And, he's going to keep his job. And the sad part about this is that one guy is going to keep his job for him, and that's Arch Manning, which you should never in a million years should you make a coaching decision or retain a coach based on one player. But all the hype around that kid, the perfect prospect, a Manning, blah, 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 he's going to be fine, even if they stumble the rest of the way. And I'm not saying they're going to lose out, but let's say they finish 7-5 and outside the top 25. I mean, they've got let me look at the schedule. Kansas State's not easy. That could be a loss, certainly a loss. TCU's not easy, at Kansas and Baylor. So let's say they go 2-2, 7-5. Sark will be fine, but it's because of Arch Manning, and that's the crazy part of the world we live in right now. Quinn Ewers had his first bad game as a college football player, but this kid's thrown 126 passes, I believe, overall in college football. Remember, he didn't even have a senior year at high school, so he
Yep.
didn't play then. He didn't play at all up at Ohio State. I mean, that's 2 years of really not playing live football. So this year, his first action, of course, against Alabama, he gets drilled and hurt. He's just, you could see he's got some flaws technically. He's a great talent, but I'm very frustrated because the talent on this offense should be winning football games like this. They should not fall apart and lose to a Texas Tech and lose to an Oklahoma State when they've got them. They've got them beaten, and they just let them come back and blow the game.
Another head scratcher. Like everyone thought this would work out. I think some people thought it would take some time. I don't think anybody saw the Miami Hurricanes being 3-4 at this point with another tough loss at home against a Duke team. That's not terrible, I guess. Mike Elko has those guys playing pretty
No,
tough.
not
But I mean,
terrible.
we knew that Mario was going to need some time to get this thing back. And obviously Tennessee State or whatever, Middle Tennessee, whoever that was not a good loss. But they got stomped pretty good at home
Yeah.
against a Duke team.
Yeah, and he came out and said, he talked about the effort, and if you don't want to play hard, get out of here. He's very frustrated. Uh, it's going to work out unless Mario Cristobal is not a good football coach, and that's the one thing that people tell me over and over again, which I still don't believe. But Oregon fans will tell you if you give them 1 second to talk about Mario Cristobal, that he's not a good coach, that he makes coaching decisions or he's too conservative on offense or this, that, and the other that lead to losses. And he had some bad losses, like Cal, Oregon State, or, but he also won 2 Pac-12 titles. One he sort of backed into. But every time they lose a game like this, I believe they're going to be fine because he's a great recruiter. But then I start to think of Jimbo, and I'm like, that guy's a great recruiter. He hasn't done anything since Jameis Winston. What if Mario's not a good coach? And I'm not a smart enough human being to know if he's a good coach or not, because I'm not there and I'm not in any sort of X and O breakdowns and things like that. But I like the guy. I think he's a great fit, perfect fit for Miami, and I think he's going to be successful. But I can't argue the point of he's not a good coach because I want to see him be a good coach before I can argue that. And to Miami fans' point, Duke is a heck of a rebuild, right?
Yep.
More so than Miami. And Elko's got them 5-3, and Mario's 3-4. So when you point to patience at Miami, they will quickly point out to you, we just got steamrolled by a team that has less talent, higher academic restrictions, and was more of a rebuild than Miami by a first-year coach. So don't talk to me about Mario Cristobal and giving him time. Duke doesn't need as much time as Miami. That's crazy. So this is not a great situation.
Well, you want to, I guess, do you question his coordinator hires, right? Josh
Yeah.
Gaddis on offense, Kevin Steele on defense. I mean, maybe he's not a great coach, but a good coach can hire other great coaches, and you can cover that up. It just feels like Gaddis and Steele just aren't clicking on either side of the ball for Mario. I'm not sure if he'll make a move after year one. I know you had said on a show previous that it felt like Gaddis was kind of working his way out of Michigan, kind of wanted out of that situation, finds himself in Miami. And once again, offense, not even though he was the assistant coach of the year, whatever that was, it just doesn't seem like there's a fit that's not clicking down there in Miami.
Yeah, so he made his reputation in Alabama, which everybody makes a reputation in Alabama because Alabama's got so much talent. You can do that. And then he was, as you mentioned, the assistant coach of the year, offensive coordinator of Michigan, blah, blah, blah. But that was Jim Harbaugh's offense. It was clear. And it still is. I mean, they got dual offensive coordinators now, and it's still Jim Harbaugh's offense. Everything about that reeks of Jim Harbaugh. So sometimes when you have, Kenny Dillingham was hired at Auburn and Gus did everything. It was Gus's offense. It wasn't Kenny Dillingham. Ryan Day was the offensive coordinator under Steve Adazio at Boston College. They ran the ball 100 times a game. That's not Ryan Day. So sometimes you can have the coordinator title, but not really do a whole lot. So now Gaddis gets his opportunity to do what he wants to do, and it fits with what Cristobal wants to do. Pro-style offense, let's play physical, let's run the ball, work off the run to the pass, and it's just not working out. Kevin Steele was just a weird hire because the guy's been around 58 schools in 58 years, just sort of a nomad. And I just didn't think that was a great hire. But Gaddis is the one getting most of the flack here. And another nice guy. I like him. But Mario's going to have some tough decisions to make after year one. He won't be under pressure to do it. The administration is not going to go to him like they did Scott Frost last year and say, you got to get rid of this guy, this guy, this guy.
Yeah.
But he might have to do that for himself. But I don't think he will because Mario runs that brand of offense, and he likes what Gaddis brings to the table. It's a tricky situation, man. It could go from 0 to 100, and Miami could be recruiting so much talent that they just can't be stopped in the ACC, or it could be like this, where they just keep losing to teams they shouldn't lose. There's probably no program with a first-year head coach that could go so high, but also could stay so low. I don't think there's any other program, and that includes Brian Kelly at LSU and some other of these first-year guys, Lincoln Riley at USC. I think this is the one that's the most puzzling to me as to, where do you see yourself in 5 years with Miami? I have no idea. I thought before the season we would see, potential playoff. But I don't really know now.
Well, obviously staying with Duke and Miami, you've got two first-year head coaches in Mike Elko, Mario Cristobal. I know you've been doing some work on ranking the first-year head coaches so far through the halfway point of the season. Mike, can you unveil some of the nuggets on that Mike Farrell, first-year head coach ranking list?
That's my middle name is Nuggets.
I can see that.
You didn't want to touch that.
I'm going to edit your Wikipedia right now. Do you have a Wikipedia, by the way? Are you on Wikipedia?
No. How do you?
You don't have a Wikipedia? I don't have one. I think anyone can make one. I don't know about that. Let me check
you make
out.
it for yourself? I mean, it seems ridiculous.
No one's going to make it for you, Mike. I mean, let's be honest. I see Mike Farrell comes up. Hold on.
No, I don't have Wikipedia.
So you were not in MASH, just so I'm clear?
Nope. That wasn't me.
That's not
the
you.
more famous Mike Farrell. No, I think somebody has to make that for you. I mean, I could have one of my minions make me a Wikipedia, but then they would have to ask me a bunch of questions about myself, and I don't want to answer those.
My options are Mike Farrell, the actor, Mike Farrell, ice hockey, Mike Farrell, athlete, or Mike Farrell, speedway rider. That could be you.
What's a speedway rider?
An Australian former motorcycle speedway rider.
There's also a Mike Farrell who writes about horse betting. And then there's a Mike Farrell who's in finance or something as well. But the Mike Farrell football player, I think, played at Penn State, and I covered him out of high school. And then the other Mike Farrell you mentioned, hockey, I've never heard that before, so that's new to me. But I'm probably about the 8th most famous Mike Farrell, which is a really sad reflection of my life. And I don't have Wikipedia, but if I did, the Nuggets, you could put that as my middle name for this week. I thought you were going to go someplace else with Nuggets.
No, why would I do that? Mike Farrell played in the NHL for a long time. He was drafted by the Capitals in 1998.
What?
Played for the Predators.
How many years did he play?
Well, he only had about a cup of coffee in the NHL, 13 games with the Capitals and Predators.
Guy, right? He probably sucks.
AHL guy, yeah. Last time at 2003, 2004, 49 games for the Milwaukee Admirals.
I'm more famous than that.
10
I could play
goals.
for the Milwaukee Admirals. I mean, whoopee-doo. I can't even skate, but I could play for the whatever, Milwaukee, whatever.
A lot of
All
penalty
right.
minutes, though. That sounds about right for you.
Well, then I apologize. He could kick my ass. So if
That
he's a
seems on
good
brand.
player, I
That seems
like
on brand.
him a lot. He's a great guy. He could really kick my ass.
Yes,
He's got
we apologize,
penalty
Michael
minutes.
William Farrell.
Oh, really? That's my dad's name is William. So he's Irish, very Irish. Sonny Dykes, A+. Lincoln Riley, A+. After that, who do you think it would be? It's Mike Elko, who we were talking about.
Okay.
A-. I mean, what a great job. I mean, 5-3. And we're starting to see, right, the loss of Mike Elko and what that's doing to Texas A&M as well.
Sure.
I mean, that guy, the defense kind of carried them for a couple of years, and that guy's a great defense coordinator. And he was at Notre Dame. I mean, the guy can coach, and he's doing a great job. I didn't think he'd be successful at Duke. Brian Kelly, B+, just because they're a little erratic. Dan Lanning, B+, doing a great. So as you can tell, I'm a harsh grader, and I kept them out of the A range because he lost 49-3 to Georgia. Joey McGuire in the B+ range, and then let's get to the bottom because nobody cares about Kalen DeVore and Jake Dicker and Mario Cristobal, C-. Not good. Brent Venables, D.
Wow.
Marcus Freeman, C-. And Brent Pry, the only one with an F. So a lot of first-year guys not really doing.
What does Mario get a C-? What
do you think he should be a D?
What's his signature win this year?
Hold on, I'm gonna tell you right now. I did extensive research on this. Hold on. Why are you gonna ask questions in the middle of a podcast?
I just found that one interesting. I mean,
they started off 3-0. You know,
his wins are against Bethune, Southern Miss, and the aforementioned F-rated Brent Pry.
Well, listen, they played well against.
And they were losing to Southern Miss for a few minutes, but go ahead.
They lost to North Carolina, but it was a close game, and they didn't give up 50 points. So there's that. They lost to an at the time ranked Texas A&M team. So I mean, listen. I don't know. There's certain.
What did you have, Marcus Freeman? Was Marcus Freeman also a C-?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's because 2 home losses, Stanford and Marshall, are just unacceptable.
So I think I'm consistent with you. I think you're wrong on both, but at least you're consistently wrong on both. So that makes sense.
You think he's a D also?
I do, yeah.
Did
you not just say Marshall and Stanford at home?
Yeah, I did. But you don't think the loss to Ohio State was a good one?
As good as Dan Lanning's lost to Georgia. I think a lot of people lose to Georgia.
You notice how I got Venables as a D below both of those guys.
I didn't argue that either. Yeah, that's a
dumb well, it is. But I mean, also, I like a lot of these guys. Marcus Freeman, I don't really know. I covered him in high school. Venables is a good guy. I like him, but I had to give him a D. Mario Cristobal is a good guy. I like him a lot. C-. Maybe I was a little lenient in my grades.
Of those bottom guys, who has the most opportunity to get their grade up next year? You said Mario already. Venables, okay.
Venables for sure. I think Marcus Freeman's over his head at Notre Dame, and I don't think he's going to be successful there. Cristobal will be successful to some level at Miami simply because of his recruiting. And Venables will be successful at Oklahoma simply because it's too big a program, and also the recruiting that comes in. He walked into a perfect storm of Lincoln Riley absolutely pulling a Jimbo and screwing everybody out the door. And, okay, I'm going to take my starting quarterback and I'm going to make sure the backup quarterback transfers. I'm going to take one of our best wide receivers. I'm going to make sure one of our other best wide receivers transfers. You're going to lose your tight end because he's going to go with your backup quarterback, on and on and on. So he still had talent, but he kind of got screwed. Billy Napier is a C+. That's another big name guy. There's been a lot of coaches that I don't think are, people thought they'd be successful immediately. And there's a lot of problems at these programs. But when you see a Sonny Dykes and a Mike Elko having success,
I was gonna say, so how does that happen then, Mike? How does a Mike Elko come in with Duke and have them playing really well, and a Miami that has a ton of talent and a Florida that's a ton of talent can't figure it out? Like, how does that happen?
You cannot make excuses, honestly. You can't. I mean, you want to. Billy Napier inherited a team where Dan Mullen wasn't really into recruiting for a couple of years. Well, still, you got more talent than Duke does at every position. and
If
you
you
aren't
switch
winning.
Mike Elko and Billy Napier right now, where are the records the same for both schools?
No, no. Billy Napier would be a disaster at Duke. I don't think he's going to be successful at Florida. And this isn't a shot at Billy Napier, but I don't think there's any patience at Florida for anybody.
Okay.
I mean, this is a Dan Mullen, team that uh, almost was a touchdown away from beating Alabama in the SEC championship, and almost went to the playoffs. To the next year, 6 games in, everyone wants him fired, and that's how it was. McElwain quit because the pressure was too much there. There's going to be no, acceptance for Billy Napier being average, and I don't think he's going to be successful as a result of that. Doesn't mean he's a bad coach, but no, it takes the right type of guy who's learned under the right type of people, um, I guess, to be successful. And I think Elko has really been a sponge. And I'm not saying Jimbo taught him a lot because I think Jimbo's kind of a joke. Um, but I think Brian Kelly and some of the other guys that he learned football under really taught him, and I think his experience at Notre Dame really taught him how to handle a highly academic program. It also helps the ACC sucks. That helps. If Florida were in the ACC, that record wouldn't be what it is now. So let's give it Mike Elko props. But you want to look at his marquee wins? I'll pull them up for you. Miami, who
Mm-hmm.
sucks, right? And who else is Duke beaten? Hold on, I'm a little slow. Temple, Northwestern, North Carolina AT and North Carolina, not AT&T. That's my phone number. A&T and
Yeah.
Virginia. All of those teams suck. Every one of them sucks, including Miami. So he doesn't have any good wins either. But I just put more credence on walking into a dumpster fire at Duke, where guys are studying to be doctors, um, and basketball rules, than a guy going to Miami, where there's more talent at every position on that roster, and he should be winning more football games.
Fair enough, Mike. It is late. You and I are recording this late. I feel bad. I feel like I got to get you to bed. You look a little grumpy. I don't know if you're tired. You've had a long day. Keeping MikeFarrellSports.com afloat. Plug anything you want on the website for people who haven't visited
Oh
there in a long
man,
time.
it's been good. We made a few changes here and there, and I've done some changes to how I promote the content. As far as making it a little bit more interesting for you to read. And Mike versus the World, by the way, I told you. You thought I
Yeah,
was joking. Listen, it's not viral,
it's not. I have not been yelled at yet.
but have you seen the numbers for us? I mean, they're pretty good. It's not
Okay,
bad.
go us.
So we got to keep doing those. Those are on the site too, and that helps. I put those on the site, which I'm so lazy sometimes I don't. But this is the type of stuff. So we added a tremendous draft portion. We got my guy Luca, the Italian stallion, who's doing our draft stuff. So we have a consistent draft product, whereas before I could do draft. I've done draft forever, and I'm going to do draft when the draft gets closer. But now we've got a consistent draft presence. My guy Mark with the portal has been doing more and more stuff. He also does he does not just the portal, but he does the freshman report. So if you like that type of stuff, um, we've added a couple of new writers that have been writing very, very interesting stuff. My guy Kyle Golick always has really good stuff that he writes when he like a deep dive into stuff. He just did one Sunday about the Big 12 and how they're fine. Texas and Oklahoma, you can leave. We'll be just fine, and they actually might be stronger. So that was
I agree.
really good. But I think overall our content's just better. I do the 3 point stance, I do the fact or fiction, I do the grading first year coaches. I've been doing the mine and Mike's. As far as what's the Oklahoma mess? Is Miami ever going to be good? Any sort of. But people really gravitate towards coaching, opinion, recruiting. We've been doing better recruiting stuff too. We've got a full time recruiting guy now who puts out something, at least one big recruiting article every day. So everything's kind of coming together. The traffic is up. I think we're up 40% over the last month. So things are going really well there. That being said, I still don't have a ton of sponsors. I'm not reeling in a ton of money because of that. So if anybody wants to sponsor, hit me up. But I'm very proud of the product we're starting to produce now. And, compared to where we were in May, we're just really, really in a good place.
Well, it's great to hear. Again, if you're listening to us, then you should definitely subscribe to anything Mike's doing. Social media, M Farrell Sports on Twitter, on Instagram, YouTube, Mike Farrell Sports. Again, the website is MikeFarrellSports.com. Bookmark it, subscribe to it, check it out every morning. Make it part of your daily routine, and tell a couple friends if you know people who love college football as much as you do, love it enough that you're listening to us or reading Mike, and you have friends who are in that same spot. They might like that same stuff too. So go ahead and tell a friend or two. Mike and I will not be mad at you for that. We appreciate everyone for hanging out with us, though. It's a bit of a longer episode, so even though I don't know if we knew we had anything to talk about, Mike's got some. Hold on, we got some.
That was auto.
Yeah, we got an advertisement from a company who does not sponsor us, but maybe they should.
Well, there won't. Who is this?
If they did, I don't know what you're doing.
Who this is. Well, no, it's ESPN. I mean, every time I click
well, you're looking at the screen, like we can see what you're looking at, so it's hard for me to help you when you say, "What is this?" Because I don't really.
Well, I'm trying to see who this is an ad for. This is the other thing is too. You can get 30 seconds into an ad and have no idea what they're talking about. Oh, Elevance Health. Great. Well, they can sponsor with us, but that's the autoplay on ESPN. It happens to me on every show I do, and I can't stop it. So yes, but I didn't mean to interrupt your spiel. Subscribe to the podcast.
Yes. Do that too.
Follow me on social media.
Yes.
Watch for more Mike versus the Worlds, which are really, starting to do well. And let's get out of here because it's 1 hour and 6 minutes.
Adios, friends. We'll talk to you next time.